Hey now folks, my name is Nick, and today we're taking a look at Battle for Souls, designed by Robert Burke and published by Robert Burke Games. Now this game is primarily a two-player card game, although it could be played with either two teams of 2 players each, or you could even play it solo. But the premise remains the same in any case. You are taking control of either the forces of heaven or the forces of hell, and using your angelic or demonic powers respectively to influence souls down on earth by either playing to their virtues or to their vices. And this is all done through card-driven sort of hand management and set collection, basically turning in poker hands, although you do have demons and angels and holy relics and unholy relics that will help you out and give you special powers. The game has sort of a unique feel to it, mainly based on the artwork that is used. It's public domain artwork from the Renaissance that shows some pretty striking pictures of angels and heavenly beings, but also some pretty grotesque artwork of demons, devils, and depictions of hell, which all adds up to giving the game sort of a unique presence in the board gaming market. Now, does all that add up to a unique game? Well, a lot of people on Kickstarter thought so, and hence it was on Kickstarter and it made its funding goal easily. But let's take a look and you can decide for yourself. Battle for Souls is a primarily two-player game that encompasses the battle of heaven and hell over mortal souls. Now, I'm going to primarily explain the game as if it was a two-player game, although the game can be played in teams, and if you play it with teams, there's just a little bit of rules modification as to how your teammate, it'll be 2 teams of 2 players. So there's some rules as to how your teammate can interact with your discarded cards and how many cards you actually can discard, and how certain abilities are used, but the game is primarily the same. The same goes for doing a solo game. The rules are basically the same, except that you're just choosing one side, and you're trying to get to 35 points before you run out the deck the first time. So, explaining it as a two-player game. First off, each player is going to choose to play as either heaven or hell. And the thing about this game is that all of the cards are basically the same for both sides. They're just different analogs of each other. So, for instance, the main deck of cards for the heavenly player are called virtue cards. For the demonic hell player, it's temptation cards. Then you have sin cards and intercession cards are basically the same thing. Devil cards and archangel cards. Unholy relics and holy relics. The points that you use to influence the souls in the center row also just have different names. So if you are the heavenly player, you're going to be using holy points. If you're the demonic devil player, or hell player, you're going to use unholy points. But all of it really functions the same. Each player also has these victory point cards, which actually are part of their main deck, but they start off to the side. During the course of the game, there are things that are going to let you take victory point cards, and they go into your discard pile, and on reshuffles, that means they're going to go back into your main deck. Now, out here in the center, we have the Mortal Souls. You have a deck of cards here, and in the two-player or team game, the game ends when that deck of souls runs out. You resolve that round, you resolve what souls are still out there, and then the game ends. Now, there are these special dice that are out here, which represent the holy or unholy points. They all start off in the center of the card. There's 3 little square spaces on each card, and the die will start off in the center. You'll just leave it on the little 1 here, and that represents that the soul is still neutral. But if the hell player adds unholy points, you put it down at the bottom of the card and put however many points you actually have that are unholy points there. And conversely, if it's the heavenly player, they'll add holy points and put the die up at top, showing the face of however many holy points are actually on that card. Now, for the sake of simplicity, when I continue to explain the rest of the game, I'm just going to explain it as if I'm the heavenly player. But just know that when I explain how a virtue, intercession, archangel, or holy relic card works, I'm also essentially explaining how a temptation, sin, devil, or unholy relic card works as well. So let's go ahead and show you what's in the Virtue card deck. Now, the Virtue cards, these are all essentially just cards with colors and names on them, and most of the cards represent the names of the heavenly virtues. So we have chastity, temperance, humility, kindness, diligence, and so on and so forth. Some of them are wild cards, which could represent any of those virtues, and scattered throughout the deck are a few reap cards, and I'll explain more about what those mean in a minute. The intercession cards are special ability cards that are going to give you either some constant effect or effect that can only be used a few times per game, and hence the game comes with these little wooden cubes which you'll use to represent uses of a certain card. And they also come with some one-time use cards that will turn into victory points at the end of the game, which is a symbol up here. And those could be +2 kindness, +2 diligence, and so on. I haven't really explained what that means yet, but we'll get to it. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to choose either an Archangel or a Devil card to start out the game with, and not only is that victory points at the end of the game, but they also give you a very powerful ability you can use once per turn. So like Azrael can do +1 to a Charitable Soul per turn, or Gabriel can use +1 to a Chase Soul per turn, and of course the Devils have the 7 Deadly Sins version, Freudian slip, of those cards. Now, the last one is the Holy Relics, which basically function like the Intercession cards, but they're very, very powerful. Also count for victory points as well, and give you special abilities usually once, twice per game, and so on. But they're usually very good, but they're not necessarily easy to get. So let's explain how a turn order actually works. And the game actually comes with some handy-dandy turn order cards that give you enough for a team game if you need them. So we'll just go through those one by one. The first thing you're going to do is use the ability of whatever Archangel or Devil you happen to have. So let's say I have Uriel. I get to add +1 to a Humble Soul. So if there happens to be a Humble Soul out there, I'm going to get to add +1 Holy Point to that card. Now let's break down what's actually on this Soul card. Like I said, you have the 3 squares over here representing neutrality in the middle, then holy and unholy at the top and bottom respectively. You have the amount of victory points the card is worth at the end of the game if you manage to reap this soul for yourself one way or the other. And you have the artwork here. Most of the artwork in the game is public domain art. Some of the stuff, like I think maybe even this art, is from like backers or things like that, or other art that the creator of the game favored. But the other important things on this card are the little half circles here. At the top, you have whatever heavenly virtue this soul is most attracted to, in this case, temperance. And then the sinly indulgence that they're most attracted to, which is, in this case, sloth. And each of the souls is basically the same in that regard. So the shepherdess is chastity and envy, and she's actually only worth 3 points. Most souls are worth either 3 or 4 points. So if you want to use your special power of your Archangel, right now there are no humble people out there right now, but let's say that you could do that. You would immediately add a point up to holy or unholy, depending on what side you are. You still keep the die on 1, and there's these little arrows here that will help you keep track of where the numbers are. Then the next thing you're going to do on your turn is purchase cards if you want. The currency of the game is also the same thing you're using to influence those souls out on the board, and that is the points on the die. So if you are a holy player, the heaven player, and you have enough holy points on the card, you could take points off of that die. In fact, you could even make it go all the way back down to neutral to actually buy one of the cards. So there's 2 cards you can buy. You can buy the Intercession cards, which it reminds you up here cost 2 holy points, or you can buy the Holy Relic cards, which it reminds you cost 3 holy points. And if this was the Devil player, it would be UP for unholy points. No jokes. And so these are basically pretty powerful cards that, like I explained before, are either going to be one-time use or they could give you victory points, and they'll stay out in front of you until they get used, which is in a further step down the line. Same thing with the Holy Relics. Once you've got done with that, then you come to where the action is, which is step 3, which is deciding how you're going to play your cards. Now, you can either play a set of virtue or temptation cards from your hand, or you can discard any number of cards from your hand, which is going to help you at the end because you start off the game with 5 cards, and you always redraw up to 5 near the end of each turn. So if you want to discard crap cards that you don't like anymore from your hand, that'll let you fill up with cards that you might like better at the end. Or you can just draw 1 new card from your hand to a limit of 8 cards. So you like all the cards from your hand, you just want to get 1 more, go for it. But it does mean you won't be redrawing at the end of the turn. Let's say, though, that you wanted to play a set of cards. So I start the game with 5 cards, and Okay, now this actually happens to be quite good. Now, essentially what this game is when you're trying to play cards is you're trying to make sets of cards, sort of like poker. And on the other side of the turn order sheet, it will show you all the different hand rewards and the types of hands you can turn in. You have everything from 1 pair, 2 pair, a set of 3 different colors, all the way up to a set of 5 different colors. Then 3 of a kind, full house, 4 of a kind, 5 of a kind. And, they all do slightly different things. So I happen to have 2 pair in my hand. So with 2 pair, if you look at the card, 2 pair is going to let me take a free Sin or Intercession card, depending on what side you're playing. Then immediately draw back up to a full hand and repeat this entire step all over again, which can be very, very powerful. So essentially I'll get to trade in these two pair by putting them into my discard pile. I'll take my free Intercession card, which is in this case is the Intercession card, St. Francis of Assisi, and then I can get this counts as a victory point at the end of the game, and I have a one-time use ability down here, which I can use later on after this in step 4. So as the holy player, I would basically want to use to either give +2 to a chastity or kindness person, or subtract 2 from a greed or envy person, which is the unholy side. So that's basically how those function. And then with that 2 pair, I get to take this whole turn over again, so I can draw cards, play cards, and so on. Now, if I had purchased a holy or unholy relic, there's another special powerful ability that I can use, and they're worth victory points. So the holy lot basically says that I can roll the die on a soul. If it doesn't come up skull and crossbones, I can double the amount of holy points on it. Just as another example, the blessed thurible says that once per turn, I can reset a single soul in play with 1 unholy point to neutral, which can really stimulate my opponent, and so on. And the hell player has unholy relics, which sort of are analogs to that. So that's what I can do in step 5. Then I can play a reap card if it's in my hand. Now, like I said, reap cards look like this, and basically this is sort of a reset for the souls out there, but it may also lead to you getting points. Every soul that's currently in play out here, and every time a soul gets reaped, you'll replace one out here, but you're either going to, if the soul already has either 4 holy or unholy points on it, that card immediately gets played by heaven or hell, depending on whether it has 4 unholy or 4 holy points. Any card that does not have at least 4 points on it just gets discarded from play. No one gets to claim it. Even if there was up to 3 points on either side on it, those points just get wasted. No one gets a card. No one gets a victory points. No one gets anything. Then the cards get replaced. Now, this can really stimmy an opponent who's already been spending a lot of points on the card, but wasn't quite able to get to the threshold of 4. But remember that it doesn't matter which player plays the reap card. If a card is eligible to be taken by heaven or hell, that player will get it. So if your opponent does it, it could still help you out in a small way. But once you've decided whether you're going to play your reap card or not, then we get down to step 7, which is drawing back up until you have 5 of either the temptation or virtue cards, and then just ending your turn. A couple other special rules to note. First off, if a soul ever gets so high in points that it gets up to where it would be at 7, in other words, you go all the way up to the 6 on the 6-sided die, and then it would gain a 7th point, that soul is immediately either completely purified or completely corrupted. And whatever points it is, holy or unholy points, that side is going to immediately take that soul as victory points, and they get to immediately flip over either an archangel or a devil, depending on what side there are. And remember that archangels and devils all count for points as well, in addition to the super cool, useful ability that they have. And that's basically how the game is played. You're going to keep making sets of cards, and you have all kinds of different sets you can make, full houses and 1-of-a-kinds, 3-of-a-kinds, all that kind of stuff. Using those cards to get points out on the souls in play in order to have enough points to claim them as your own, getting cards to give you more special powers, and doing all of that before the deck runs out and hoping that you have more points from your opponent. I'm sorry, one other thing I should mention, I think I mentioned this in the beginning too, you can get these 1-point victory cards from playing certain sets of cards and from certain Sin Intercession cards, which just go in your deck. They just take up space, but they do count as victory points at the end. And that's basically Battle for Souls. Battle for Souls is a really interesting game. There's a lot I want to talk about here. Let's start with sort of the technical stuff. The rule book is written very well. It was very easy to pick up the game and play. It gets a little bit long-winded because of the terminology involved, having to explain things on both the heaven and hell side, even though essentially it's all the same. I mean, one side is an analog of the other. They all have the same basic types of cards. They're just named either, instead of holy relics, you have unholy relics. Instead of devils, you have angels, things like that. So it gets a little bit long-winded in the rule book, but it all works pretty well. It's well written. I didn't really see any glaring mistakes, so that works well. The components of the game are pretty great. Card quality is really good stock. The box and the box insert work really well. There's a lot of space, though. I'm wondering if there's planning to be more expansions because there's a lot of space for more cards. They use little cubes for the tokens, but that's fine. They're not really that important anyways. You can play entire games without ever having to use the little cubes. The dice are really cool, the custom dice, so I like all that. So as far as the artwork goes, at first I was kind of skeptical of it because it seemed like Robert was just taking the cheap way out by using public domain art, and I'm sure in a sense that he was, but actually it works really well with the theme of the game, using these Renaissance era artwork. Some of it's actually quite good, and it sort of fits there. Some of the cards for the souls are clearly either backers of the Kickstarter or maybe the designer and the designer's friends themselves. I'm not sure, but besides that, the rest of the artwork works pretty well. Some of the art's kind of grotesque on the hellish side, but again, that's just sort of the theme. And on that theme, let's talk about the theme a little bit. I don't know if paste it on is probably a strong word. The game is pretty abstract when it comes down to it. Like I said, the artwork helps a lot in sort of reinforcing the theme, but really, you could sort of put anything you want on this. It actually, the game felt a lot to me like Pinata or its predecessor, Balloon Cup, in that you're playing cards down, albeit in a different way, but you're playing cards down in order to influence cards or tiles in the center and get points from that. It's a little bit of a stretch, but that's what it felt like to me. And what I mean by that is that you could put a lot of different themes on this. I think it would still work. Robert Burke just happened to choose heaven and hell, and that's an interesting way to go. I kind of wonder if that does the game a disservice because I can see some people not wanting to play a game with this kind of theme. Or I should say there might be some religious people who would not want to play the game for fear of having to play the demonic side. And that can be kind of weird. Or perhaps even people that are not religious wouldn't want to play a game where heaven and hell are primary elements to the game. I'm not really religious at all. To me, it didn't really affect my enjoyment of the game. I thought that it was just an interesting way to go. But it would be interesting. I'd like to see some stats on that, on whether or not that theme really has an impact on how much attention the game is going to garner one way or the other. So let's go ahead and talk about the mechanics of the game. So like I said, the game is pretty abstract. Basically what you're doing is you're just making sets of cards and you're playing them via poker hands, 2 of a kind, 3 of a kind, 4 different colors, full house, things like that. And you're getting special powers and you're using them to influence the center cards. And for the most part, it works well. I like the flow of the game. Once you get the turn structure down, which is a very regimented turn structure that seems kind of complex at first, it's actually very simple. Using your special powers, the timing is very critical. There's actually special sections in the rulebook where it tells you, if you have to go back and change something in the timing, there's actually rules for asking your opponent to let you do so because that timing is so critical and doing things in the right order. But once you get that down, the game is actually very simple. It's really just collecting cards, trying to get different colors together. The strategy feels pretty good because you're having to make the decision of just going all out, trying to put as many points on the souls in the center row as possible, and then trying to gather them just to get points from them. But maybe you want to take a longer term strategy and actually try to get use of the holy relics in the or unholy relics or sin cards. See, that's kind of the thing. It's I hate having to say 2 different things, because they're both basically the same. But the relic cards, the sin cards, or I'm blanking on what the heavenly version of the sin cards are. Maybe intercession cards. But in any case, you have to make that decision of whether to go for those cards, which could give you better benefits over time. But at the same time, you might see your opponent going heavy and hard for those souls and collecting those, which can be some pressure there. The Reap card especially is a constant danger, I felt like, because you could be working very, very hard on getting a couple of souls, 2 or 3 souls, over to your side by putting more points on them. If you don't meet that threshold of 4 points, your opponent can play that Reap card and boom, wipe them all out. Even if he gets none, he prevents you from getting any, and that can wipe out all your work, which could be a bit more demoralizing than I would have liked. Which kind of leads me to the main issue that I have with the game. If I had to pick to point to one glaring flaw in the game, it's that I think there is a runaway leader problem in this game. Now, I've played this game 3 times in a 2-player format. I've played it twice in teams, 2-on-2, and I've played it several times solo. The solo games go very fast, and putting the solo game aside because there's not really a balance issue there, although it's very difficult. But in the teams and the 2-player game, once one side gets a lot of points underneath them, it can be very difficult to catch up with that. It's not just the points. It's the fact that, let's say that one side gets the instantly purified soul or instantly corrupted soul by getting up to the 7-point threshold. At that point, not only do they get a lot of points for that soul, but they also get a free devil or angel card, which is not only more points, 3 more points, but it gives you another special ability, giving you the ability every turn to put more and more points out on the board, which is just awesome. I mean, the more of those you get, the better. It's fantastic, but it means that it's going to be less likely that your opponent's going to be able to catch up and be able to do the same thing. Same thing if you have luck of the draw with the hands that you get. If you're able to play hands that not only get you more points out on the board on the souls, but also get you free relics, free sin cards, it's tremendous. I mean, your opponent might be chugging away just putting a couple points out here and there by getting, like, let's say 3 or 4 different colored hands. If you can get a couple full houses, I mean, it's just awesome. Especially, I should say that the 2-pair rule of having 2 different pairs of cards in your hand, it's a very simple thing to do, really. It happens a lot, but it's so powerful because not only do you get to immediately, you basically get to flush your hand, take a whole other turn, in addition to be able to put points out on the board. Very, very good, very powerful. You're limited to doing it once, but still, that's really all you need. So I do worry about that balance, and that, you know, one side could just get a crushing victory. That tends to be what has happened in the competitive games that I've played. Aside from the solo games, one side was just clear runaway winner. Especially in 2 of the 3 2-player games that I played, it was just like, okay. I mean, one player, in one of the cases it was me, the other case it was my opponent, was just like, why? Okay, there's no point. Let's just stop. We didn't stop, we kept going, but it was definitely very clear at a certain point that one person was the winner. And I don't necessarily like that in games. I think that it's, I would prefer there to be more of a balance. But then again, the length of this game is very reasonable. You're talking about, your first game might go 40, 45 minutes, just because you're trying to get the turn structure down. Once you have that, the game is very simple. Team games might go on a little bit longer because you have more wheels in the machine, just more people taking time to think and things like that. But honestly, it still does. It's not that bad. It can be a quick game, and therefore having a crushing defeat or crushing victory isn't that big of a deal. Overall, I think it's a good game. I think it's a solid game. It's not going to be for everyone. Some people are going to want more theme in the game, feel it be more thematic than just turning in sets of cards. Some people are going to want less, and they may not like that heaven and hell theme or the artwork in the game. But overall, I'm glad the game exists. I think that it fits a sort of unique niche of being the sort of strategic 2-player card game that a lot of people really, really like, but also having a unique theme and sort of approach to the genre. And, you know, I think there is an audience for this, and I'm eager to see what else Mr. Burke comes up with. So that was Battle for Souls. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.